In 1457 BC, the first recorded war in human history took place in ancient Egypt. Battle of Megiddo. In ancient times, it was very difficult for a state to maintain its central authority in all its territory. Because of this, there were frequent riots. Ancient Egypt was one of the states with the largest lands in the 15th century BC. In the Thutmose III period, preparations for rebellion were made in a region close to the Hittite border in the north of the country. The local people called Canaanites, consisting of small kingdoms, lived in what is now the land of Israel, and they wanted freedom. Thutmose III knew that the rebels had a total army of 15,000 men and war was inevitable. Central authority had to be restored. To suppress the rebellion, the Thutmose III marched to the north with 20,000 infantry and 1,000-horse chariot. The center of the rebels was the city of Megiddo. The city was protected by great walls. There was a difficult mountainous terrain surrounding the city. It was the checkpoint on the Via Maris, the main route between Anatolia and Egypt, and was a very important city. The rebels heard of Thutmose's arrival and gathered for defense. Its most important leaders were the king of Kadesh and the king of Megiddo. In total, there were 15,000 infantry and 1,000 horse chariots. Most of the army consisted of soldiers from Kadesh and Megiddo. When Thutmose III reached Tel Ezer with the Egyptian army, there was a difficult mountainous terrain to cross. Carmel Mountain Range. He had to cross these mountains to reach the city, but there were 3 transit routes. The northern route passed through Zephti and Tel Yoknim, the southern route passed through Tanakh, and these were the trade routes normally used. The shorter road in the middle was an inaccessible valley. Usually unusable, it was such a narrow valley that it seemed impossible to ride on horseback. These roads were the lands where the rebels lived. It was possible that they had set up an ambush on the road. Thutmose wanted to cross the middle road. While exchanging ideas, high-ranking personnel and advisors in the army begged him to discourage this idea. But Thutmose didn't give up. It was a very risky move, even a gamble, but he was planning a surprise attack. Thutmose gave the order and the army began advancing on the middle path. It was only possible to advance in a single line. Chariots were ineffective in an ambush. Even if there was a landslide, the army would inflict heavy casualties. The Egyptian army was afraid that they could be completely destroyed. In this way, they took the middle road for more than one day, and the Canaanites had not thought of it. The Canaanites set up ambushes on the north and south route and divided their armies into 3. The Egyptians quickly attacked the rebel troops in front of the city. The Canaanites were astonished at what had happened. Almost all of the Canaanite chariots were destroyed. The news reached the Canaanite armies in the north and south, and they took action to return to the center. The Egyptians camped next to the city. By morning, the Canaanite armies were separated and slow. Their numbers were few and their morale low. They still fought and of course lost the war. Very few survived and actually made an attack to escape into the city. Now the war had turned into a struggle for patience. The city was completely surrounded. Supply routes were cut off. A trench was dug. They built wooden fences and waited. While the siege continued, the king of Kadesh quickly broke through the siege with his soldiers for a short time and fled to his own kingdom. For 7 months, the city held out. Then the supplies ran out, and the rebels had to surrender. With the capture of the city of Megiddo, the idea of rebellion in the region weakened. There was no army that could fight Egypt anyway. Victory belonged to Thutmose III. Egyptian troops easily entered other cities in the region. Egyptian authority was restored. Kingdoms were plundered and moved to Egypt. 3. Thutmose wanted the crown princes in the region to come to the Egyptian palace at an early age. The new kings would be brought up by the Egyptian palace, so when they returned to their kingdom, they would rule with Egyptian sympathy. This is humanity's first war for which records exist. See you in the next videos.